Hey guys, I'm David Graham. I'm happy to be here and sharing some of the insights that I've picked up over the years as I've been working in large corporations with radical innovation over the last 17 years. I've been in the wind power business, I've been in the aviation business, and for the last 10 years, I've been with Lego. So I'm going to share with you some insights on how to drive and lead radical innovation in large organizations and how to thrive as an intrapreneur. You know, it's hard work leading change and radical innovation, especially in large organizations. So how do you do it? How do you do it impactful, effective, and without burning out? So I'm looking forward to now sharing that with you. So let me just share my screen here and start. So I'm going to talk about how you as an entrepreneur can drive the change from within the organization. But the first question to talk about is really, why do we need radical innovation? Isn't it easier just to stick to what we're good at and stick to our core capabilities? Isn't that what everybody said, you know, throughout the years, that you should do what you're good at? And you're right, that has been true for many years, but the challenge now is, and I'm guessing you all know that, but radical is sort of the new normal. And what does that mean? It means that the time you have from something is radically new in the market till it's a mainstream commodity gets shorter and shorter. So the time you have as a pioneer to recoup on your investment gets shorter and shorter. And as a second mover, and most bigger companies are second movers, which means they'll be sitting around waiting for somebody else to do something before they move in, you basically have no time to catch up. So the challenge is, how do you cope with that? And the real question here is not too much to ask, you know, what's going to change and when, because that's hard to foresee. The real question to ask is, how do we take a lead on this change? How do we put ourselves in front of what's happening and be the driver of these changes? And to do that effectively, you have to build a capability of exploring and experimenting with new offerings. Constantly exploring with what's changing within user behaviors, with new technologies, with new business models, with new user segments. So you're constantly learning about what are the right opportunities for us in the future. And you sort of need to adopt the scientist mindset. You know, scientists are really good at experimenting with combining new components. You know, what happens when we put this component together with this? And oftentimes the biggest inventions coming from scientists are from their mistakes. When they fail, when something unanticipated happened. And we sort of need to adopt that same mindset of saying, how can we become really good at constantly experimenting, putting new things together, failing, but doing it in a way where we are learning and where we are de-risking, meaning being more agile and nimble about it. And obviously it's also about launching, getting to market quicker than in the old days of corporate innovation. Very quickly getting into the market, get real live data to understand what's going on. So what's the problem, you might ask? Why is it that it seems that large organizations are really struggling with experimenting and exploring new radical and disruptive solutions and innovations? And oftentimes they're more looking to smaller startups to do the heavy lifting on these things. Well, there's a challenge, and that is when big companies grow up, or as they grow up, they tend to stop experimenting. And so do we as adults, actually, right? When we grow up, the older we get, the more likely we are to stick to what we're good at, to stick to what we know. We don't want to expose ourselves and look foolish or fail in front of other people. So we become more and more conservative, and we double down on the things that we're already good at. And that's the same thing that happens in large organizations. They double down on what they're really good at and they stick to it. And it becomes increasingly more difficult doing something new. And that's why they then rely on startups, because they have that youth and young, you know, entrepreneurial spirit. And actually, you know, we're all hardwired to experiment. Because as kids, we did nothing but experiment. That's the only way that kids learn how to talk, how to walk, how to do anything. And when a child tries to stand up for the first time and tumbles over, the parents don't go to that child and say, well, that's a failure right there. I mean, I hope not. I hope instead they go to that child and say, well done, try again, see if you can improve your technique. And somehow we need that same mindset in our organizations. How can we constantly encourage our employees, our peers to experiment, to learn, daring to fail and get up again? Because if we don't, we become rigid and stuck. And that can happen in our personal lives. And when it happens to companies, it can be deadly. And we've seen numerous cases of companies falling from the heights when they got stuck on their existing way of doing things. So there is a need for an entrepreneurial culture in our organizations, because the entrepreneurs are those that are constantly challenging what is. They're curious, they're exploring. They're like the entrepreneurs, but inside the company. But how to build that? And the challenge that we've seen over the years is that in many large organizations, entrepreneurship or innovation in general tend to fail. Many innovation labs open up and they close down again. So I put up some of the things that are crucial in succeeding with innovation, and especially radical innovation. And first and foremost, you need a clear long-term direction and purpose with your innovation. I've seen too many companies where when they're doing their main business, they have a very set strategy and know exactly what they want to do. But when it comes to innovation, they're sort of randomly exploring stuff. You need to be equally strong at setting clear directions and identifying opportunity spaces for what it is you want to do. Also, many companies don't have the right structure of governance, meaning it's going to take way too long getting into a market and they're making the wrong decisions. Or the tools they have is not the right ones. They need agile tools to quickly move forward. Or the teams may be measured on the wrong KPIs. So instead of measuring them on their ability to explore new territory, they only measured on, when are you creating top line results for the company? And that will pull them in the wrong direction. Or you might even have set the wrong team. So they don't have the necessary skills, or maybe they have the wrong attitude. Maybe they're too arrogant. Maybe they're not collaborative enough with the surrounding world. So in the next slides, I'm going to just cover how to tackle some of these things. And first and foremost, it's about setting clear opportunity spaces. You don't want to be boiling the ocean when you're exploring new territory. And you do this by really understanding what is changing in the world. Immerse yourself in those changes. You need to understand what's happening at ground zero, reading the weak signals out there. And when you gather all these insights, you can sort of organize them so you have all the different user insights, you have your new technologies, your new business models, your new geographies, whatever it is, and then you do pattern recognition. Like, what are the patterns? And connecting the dots across that. What happens if we take this user need with this new technology, with this new business model, and put it together? And like that, you identify opportunity spaces that then becomes clear areas of interest where you can also leverage your existing core capabilities. So at Lego, they identified these two clear opportunity spaces. One is digital play. How can Lego as a company make digital play become more creative, more about empowering users to have creative skills and capability? That's a big task. The other one is education. How can Lego take its core values and capabilities around creativity and learning and playfulness into the educational system and transform that? So these are two clear areas that the company is now pursuing based on its insight, knowledge, and understanding of those spaces. But when you need to execute, then you need multiple innovation teams. Often in the old days, there would be just one big sleepy innovation team at the core of the company. And the challenge would be that they would come up with great ideas and concepts and whatnot, but very few of them would see the day of light in the market, and even fewer would be scaled because there wouldn't be a capability to actually take them to market or even to scale them further. To be able to do that, you need innovation capability across the entire value chain, in your marketing and sales department, in your production, even in your business support area, your finance, your legal, your procurement. They should also be innovating alongside with you. What are the future type of contracts we need to make with vendors or partners? How do we source these new type of materials, maybe through startups, etc.? So somehow the entire value chain need to be part of your innovation effort and not just in one isolated lab. So innovation projects should be run really like lean startups. And this starts with being able to produce prototypes and prototypes very quickly. And there is a reason why I'm saying prototype here, because if you tell an engineer or designer to create a prototype, they think they have to make something that actually works, which can take anything from months to years to build. Now, instead, if you create prototypes, you pretend to have a prototype. You're basically faking it. And the visual here is an example from IDEO, where they had to build an app for a client for kids. And instead of pulling in coders and starting to code and build the app, they printed an iPhone on a foam board. The foam board is hanging from the ceiling. They carved out a hole where the screen is. The guy's standing behind. She's in front. She's recording on a laptop. And when she pokes, he responds. And in about 2 to 3 hours, they had recordings of 3 to 4 different conceptual directions. And in the subsequent hours, they had kids in to review these. And they would get a sort of real emotional response from the kids on whether they thought the interaction was fun and engaging. And in just one day, they already had some clear indications on which of the directions are most relevant and interesting. And that's the type of speed you want to have. That's what it means to be lean, to move very quickly from idea to concept to test. And then you also want to move in through multiple iterations. So at Lego, we would run in 2-week work cycles, which means on the Monday of the first week, the team would formulate the hypothesis into the opportunity space and say, we believe that if we do this and this, then this will happen. Then they would create their prototype. They would test it with kids. And on the Friday of the second week, they would evaluate the results with management to understand what are we changing, which of our assumptions was right, which was wrong, what do we do the next 2 weeks. And the advantage of this is that any team can only run in the wrong direction for maximum 2 weeks. And then they'll be confronted by real users saying, that's not exactly fun and engaging. Finally, you want to do market validation through pilot launches. So really important to get all the way into the market to be able to validate. And this will also help you in arguing for the projects to upper management. If you actually had it in the market, if you have real live data from users, if you've seen it in the environment of the real use situation. And finally, it's about measuring the performance in the right way for these teams. There's a challenge here that often innovation teams are being measured like the rest of the organization, so mainly focusing on the end result. When are you delivering top-line results? But that's not the way to measure radical innovation teams. Rather, you want to use the same mentality as a venture capitalist portfolio manager. Because first and foremost, you need to realize that you need multiple bets to have one right. And 9 out of 10 of your bets are going to fail, but that 1 out of 10 might succeed. So multiple bets. And then instead of only looking at end results, which is not meaningful, you instead look at how are these teams able to move from one milestone to the other. What's the experimentation velocity? How quickly are they uncovering new territory, building new capability, validating hypotheses? Those are the teams you want to bet on. That's the performance you will be measuring and rewarding. So in summary, you don't want to aim to get it right the first time. You want to aim to iterate. And that's very tempting. Back to these large organizations, they want to get it right the first time. They don't want to fail. They don't want to look foolish or wrong. It's the fear of failing. And we know it from our own personal lives. So we need to move beyond that. But the final challenge is, how do you then cope with the resistance as an entrepreneur? And there will be resistance. When you are driving these radical innovation projects, a lot of people will not be able to understand why this is important, why this is necessary, and what it is at all. And so this is very hard, and it makes it hard to be an entrepreneur. And typically, in my experience, 2 things happens to entrepreneurs. Either they give up and do as they're told, or they burn out and leave. And lately, what I'm seeing is that the new generations, the millennials and Gen Zs, they don't even want to start. They don't want to get stuck somewhere in a silo in a large organization and have 0 impact. So that's a growing challenge for companies. How do they attract and retain these entrepreneurs in the future. So that's why I developed what I call the 5 habits of high impact entrepreneurs, because there's a trick to the trade. There's a way to go about how you actually behave and lead innovation in order to be successful. And the first habit is to accept the resistance. Understand that it will be there, and it's for natural human reasons. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of what will happen to me if this happens. Or it's just that it's confusing and distracting from what people are otherwise doing. So don't take this personally. You know, that's why people burn out. It's when they take the resistance personally. Instead, understand that it's natural, that it's there, and try to start to figure out ways to diffuse it or to manage it. So just a couple of stories on how I have been dealing with this in my career. So at Lego, we were facing this, you know, lots of resistance on many of our concepts and ways of working. So we realized that the teams were under a lot of pressure, and they were struggling to maintain their motivation and passion. So we actually started researching a little what other teams out there are also facing hard odds and a lot of resistance. And we actually looked at U.S. Navy SEAL teams, because obviously, you know, they're facing a lot of hard odds when going on a mission. And if they're successful, nobody will hear about it because it's secret. And if they fail, they'll likely be dead in a ditch. Obviously, it's not that bad for innovation entrepreneurs, but still there's something about how do they cope with that. So we invited some Navy SEALs in to our lab to talk about how they deal with this. And one of the things we learned was that they spend a lot of time after each mission on debriefing, basically crying out on each other's shoulders, but also really learning from what happened. Why did you do this? What happened to this guy? You know, what can we improve in our technique, in our operating model, etc. So based on this, we decided to create something similar at Lego. So we created what we call safe houses. And it's basically meetings where we meet in a place that's safe, where there's psychological safety, meaning here you can cry out on each other's shoulders. Here you can really talk about the hard stuff behind all the objectives with your projects. You know, why was this stakeholder really against us? What happened here? I'm feeling really fatigued with these things. So it's a space where you learn, where you grow, where you evolve as a team, as an individual. That turned out to be very powerful in creating psychological safety for the teams. Secondly, we also created a number of principles, which is a little like the ethos for the team, you know, something they live by. And this helps them to create legitimacy around the way of working that the teams have chosen. And that's very important so that they can constantly defend themselves against the rest of the organization when they're saying what you're doing is not valuable, what you're doing is not legitimate. So they build these principles and say we're sticking to them and we believe it's right. Second habit is only to break the rules you understand. And you will be breaking a lot of rules, both formal and informal, to be able to succeed with your new radical innovation projects. But you need to understand, why were these rules there in the first place? What do they serve? Who's guarding them? And whose toes are you stepping on as you are breaking them? Because you need to be able to pick these people up as you move along. And also you really need to be able to build a bridge between what was and what needs to become. That includes the story of why do we need to change these rules? Why can we no longer do things the way that we've done maybe for the last 50 or 100 years? So this is about really understanding the core of the company. And at Lego, in Innovation Lab, we called ourselves Lego fundamentalists, because we knew we needed to know even more about the core values and aspects of Lego so that we constantly could tell the story of why that was still true, but in this new reality that we were building. So just ways of dealing with that. One is to make sure that you tie every experiment that you have very closely up to your mission and strategy. So that means you start by setting a very strong mission and strategy for your innovation efforts. You identify these opportunity spaces, which becomes very clear, and you have a lot of stories to tell about these spaces and why they're relevant for the future of your company. Then you create these hypotheses, which is basically the beliefs you have. We believe that if we do this and this, then this will happen. and then you run an experiment to explore that. So if somebody asks, why are we doing this seemingly irrelevant project at the fringes of the company, you can tell a strong story about how that leads up to the very essence of the purpose of your company. And let me also share a story of actually leveraging the system. So you will be breaking rules, but there will also be rules that you maybe should not break. So I have a personal experience from a project that I was running. It was called Life of George. It was the first experiment where we had real physical bricks and a digital app that worked together. So it was a very simple game where you were following this guy, George. He would be taking pictures of stuff, and the pictures were in the app, and you needed to build them with physical bricks as a two-dimensional model. So, but when you started building, there was a timer. So you needed to build as fast as possible. Once you built the model, you would place it on this small board, and you would scan it with your phone's camera. And it would actually read exactly what did you build, what colors, what shapes, and give you points based on accuracy and speed. Very fun, small game. We launched it very quickly in the market. And normally it takes up to 24 months in the stage gate model at Lego to launch something new. We did it in just 6 months. So we were bypassing a number of the rules and processes and procedures. And unfortunately, we also ended up making a big mistake. So on the packaging, it was indicated what devices will work with this game. And that's very important, because otherwise you have people buying the product whose device, iPhone, phone or tablet, will not work with it. Unfortunately, we made a mistake there and wrote the wrong thing. It got launched and just up to Christmas, and we had to pull it back. We had to relabel thousands of boxes with the right information. And what I had missed was that there was a very clear checklist that one should follow that makes sure that you got all these things right. And I had sort of, in the speed of things, overlooked that and thought, we don't need it. It's going to take too long. Let's just do it. So that's an example where you still do want to leverage the system. Some of those rules that are in there are actually, meaningful and should be leveraged. Third point is building a tribe. So you want to create fellowship. You want to have more and more people be part of your project, supporting your project, being fans of your project. So try not to see your project as a project or as a product or service, but rather as a movement, something that's changing the very nature of the company and its own way of seeing itself. And to do that, you need to be very open and transparent and inviting people in. I've seen many innovation teams that sort of closing around themselves, keeping to themselves, keeping everything secret and hushed up. And that's only going to alienate the rest of the organization and create sort of a them and us culture. Rather, you want to open up and bring them on board. So a couple of examples of that. We did that in Lego, where we created, in our innovation lab, we created demo days. So every 2 weeks, there would be a demo day where people that were interested would be invited to come and see all the ugly prototypes that were happening in the lab. And through that, we had people leaning in more and more, understanding, why are we doing these things? Why is this project important? And they would even start to steal with pride from the stuff that we were showing. So over time, we would increase our fellowship in the organization. That was very effective. Also, what we started to do was to give back to the community, meaning back to the existing core business. So we would have a part of our team in the Innovation Lab allocated to support projects in the core business. So if they had a problem, we would lend out some of our people to actually support it. And that way, we connected the dots between the two different areas. Fourth habit is to write love letters, and lots of them. Because to create that fellowship, you need to be very kind and humble and respectful. It is the existing core business that's paying your salary, right? And in a way, you are standing on the shoulders of giants as you're looking into the future. And be respectful of that. Show that you care. Show that you respect the existing core business. But this is also about, if you can see there are some resistance and some people that are moving against you, let's say the CFO is trying to shut you down or is not understanding what you're doing, be proactive and reach out very quickly. Get the person involved. Make that person in the know about what's going on. Empower that person to feel inspired about what's going on. So that is what this means. And a couple of examples of how to do that. So we were in Future Lab at Lego, we were often facing problems, especially with legal, finance, procurement, because those are the people that sort of are policing the various different aspects. And a lot of the rules we were breaking were touching their area. So we felt, okay, how do we avoid constantly having a battle with these guys? So we said, let's bring them close. So we created hot desks in our office for people from these different departments. And to begin with, it was only the young people from these units that would come in because they thought it was very cool to hang out with the innovation dudes. Later on, even the senior people started showing up because they heard from the junior people that, you know, some really interesting stories about what was going on. They felt that, you know, by hanging out there, they would be in the know of some of the new cool stuff that would be coming. So soon over time, they became some of our closest allies. And later, these, you know, legal, finance, and procurement started to create their own innovation lab where they, together with us, would invent what are the future way of legal contracts, what are the future way of sourcing new materials, etc. So in that sense, we brought them very close. It was very successful. Also, you want to be really good at telling your story. As an entrepreneur, you should really be a storyteller. Use any opportunity you can to get out there and talk to other departments, talk to other areas of the company, talk to your partners and vendors to make them understand what it is you're trying to do and how that's changing the way that the company works. Finally, you want to make other people shine. And this is about, both it's about sharing the spoils of the wins, but it's also about making sure that what you're doing doesn't end up being a one-off. And I've seen several organizations carrying through an innovation project, but that becomes a one-off. It's hard to repeat, and you don't build that repetitive system. And part of the reason for that is that if you didn't make other people shine, if you kept all the spoils to yourself, the rest of the organization is just going to look at you and say, well, you know, he's not going to get through that the second time around. So make sure that everyone that was involved, even those that gave you resistance in the beginning, are being rewarded, are being celebrated as when your project succeeds. So a couple of ways of doing that, I actually had a project manager on the team who always, when he met a new stakeholder or when he met a difficult stakeholder, someone where he needed something from them, he would bring chocolate. And he would be saying like, well, I was just in Switzerland, I picked this chocolate up for you, there you go. And though it seems like a sort of a silly and slightly bribery thing to do, it really, really works. People felt that he cared about them, and they just opened up more. So sometimes these small things really carries a long way. Also, what we did was to really celebrate every milestone achieved in our innovation teams. Whenever there was a reason to celebrate, we would, and we would invite the broader stakeholder network to join. So everybody felt that they were part of something amazing that was moving and changing. It's about balancing the spirit of the rebel with the skills of the diplomat. You know, the rebel is that curious person that's constantly challenging what is, exploring new things. But you also need the diplomat who's able to have empathy for, you know, the people that have resistance, who's able to navigate and leverage the corporate ecosystem and its powers. So really you want to become a diplomatic rebel. Thank you guys. That's all I have. Now we're ready to take questions.